What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Smogon Premier League 12, Week 1, Conflict versus TDK in a GSC OU battle. What more could you possibly ask for? So, Conflict is representing the Dragon Spyral Tyrants, and TDK is on the side of the congregation of the Classiest. It may be his first time representing GSC in an SPL. So, I was pretty excited to see this game. I think it had a lot of innovation. You see a new player and a veteran. There's so much to be said about Smogon games because of the investment that there is in it and the types of innovation that you can see when compared to a standard tournament. So if you guys are interested in seeing more games, then I suggest that you, make a recommendation, make a suggestion in the comments, and leave a like if you can. So let's just get right into it, shall we? And the first thing that you see here, Eggy versus Snorlax lead, and then TDK switches into Cloyster. So he's probably trying to maintain some sort of spikes control. He wants to get his early spikes. Maybe this team is a boom offense team. Conflict, on the other hand, goes for return, so maybe his Snorlax is a return belly drum Snorlax. Maybe it has Earthquake. He decides to bring in his own Cloyster on TDK's Cloyster, and interestingly enough, Cloyster gets the Toxic. Not a bad call, since that way he can also put the Snorlax on a timer, not just a Zapdos or a Cloyster. It's a good second turn move, and Toxic on what potentially could be a belly drum user sounds like a really good idea, at least as far as I'm concerned. Also, he doesn't go for something like some status or an explosion on Snorlax. It's too soon to tell. So, but I'm guessing that the team is boom offense here. I mean, I know what the team is. I already saw this replay, but let's say from the given information. And so both of them go for spikes, but now TDK has some sort of momentum going as he brings in his Zapdos. On the other hand, Conflict decides to go for a Toxic again, which is, or not again, sorry, for his first Toxic, and reveals a Blissey as his primary answer towards Zapdos, which is interesting. And in this scenario, so if we go back on the turn of the Blissey here, Cloyster vs. Bliss, it was an interesting double too. TDK has this big threat with the Cloyster. He can boom on essentially anything. He can Toxic and punish things. If Conflict has a normal resist or immunity, now is the time to bring it in. Whereas before, if he had, let's say that the normal resist is also your electric immunity, this would have been a much better position for TDK. So, Steelix. Turns out, though, that he decompressed. He has a Misdreavus as a normal resist, and his electric resistor is his Blissey. Still, he can explode here and potentially gain a lot of momentum, but Conflict probably knows this, so what is TDK going to do? We already know that Conflict brings in his Misdreavus, and TDK explodes. A little bit precocious, especially given how the game will play out. This lasts long, let me tell you that. So here, the Misdreavus takes the Thunder, and that's because Conflict wants to be, wants to see if TDK is paying attention. He's going to catch him slipping if he decides to bring something else in, and he could punish that with a Toxic. I don't think that, the only other thing that could possibly come in on Misdreavus completely without any issues, except with maybe the risk of like a Hypnosis or something, would be a Steelix. So yeah. or some pursuit user maybe. So far we've seen 1 explosion cloister, and 2 more boom users. Now this gives me the idea that the team is very likely it's a very common core of boom offense, and usually that's done to clear the way for some sort of sweeper. Could be Machamp, could be Marowak, Vaporeon. Keep in mind that the Cloyster tried to boom on a Blissey, so maybe he has, a Vaporeon, or maybe he wants the Blissey out of the way to help the Zapdos pave the way for the other sweepers. So it could still be a Marowak or a Machamp. Now, the Blissey's back in again, and this time around TDK has some momentum still, despite the early boom miss. So Conflict brings in his Cloyster, and TDK goes for a Rapid Spin. So this turn is also kind of interesting. He's not too concerned about the Blissey here. Blissey doesn't want to be taking too much damage, and let me tell you that Golem can deal quite a lot, and a lot of teams that have Blissey really need to rely on it to be able to ward off Zapdos. And it looks so far that this team doesn't have another electric immunity. And Conflict's Cloyster goes for a Rapid Spin, whereas the Golem actually chips the Cloyster and doesn't take the risk of the... he takes the risk of being surfed, but he goes for it anyway, and that's because he knows that in his back row he has, a lot of potential momentum. If Conflict were to choose to take Golem, it would be a trade-off for spikes, and then Zapdos can start dealing a lot of damage here, and then he could just switch back to something else and really threaten a Blissey with his Exeggutor, and that would be a really tight spot. So Conflict knows this, he goes for the Rapid Spin, and TDK also knows this, and he goes for the Earthquake, and now Cloyster has taken quite a lot of damage. Conflict gets his spikes, and then goes to Blissey. The fact that it dodged a Thunder doesn't necessarily matter too much. So in comes Golem once more, and this time round we see that Conflict goes for a Heal Bell. I think this is a really good call because now he healed his Poison Cloyster, and you'll see why. So Skarmory comes in, and here's the secondary normal resist. So this is just a head-on stall team. You got your Earthquake plus Stab Lax Resistor. You have something that can, dodge Mono Lax and can also take care of Flamethrower or Fire Blast. You have an Electric Resist special Wall or Sponge. Something that can do a lot of damage. You have your Spikes control. So all in all, really solid core. And there's also the Toxic and the Spikes. So yeah. Skarm goes for Spikes here because even though TDK can spin, if he were to, his Golem would be poisoned. So not a good sight. But it seems like it doesn't matter because TDK is managing to bring in his Golem each time he expects Conflict to come with the Blissey. And here you go. And as I said earlier, the Cloyster was going to, would certainly have died if it were still poisoned. And that would have been a pretty annoying issue because, well, with the fact that it didn't take poison damage, what looks like a really close roll is actually a maximum roll. And it's not 30%, but 29.7%. Pokemon Showdown likes to round up percentages a lot. But, so yeah, this Cloyster would have certainly survived an Earthquake here, but would not have if it were still poisoned. So he comes in, and this is a good call because it's still a really tricky situation. Like, The Cloister, just because the Cloister's gone doesn't mean this can't explode on Blissey. Or can't chip away the Misdreavus. Another thing that I didn't mention earlier is that it would have been very risky for Conflict to try and spin block here. Not only because he doesn't necessarily think that it's worth it, but also due to the fact that it would take an unnecessarily large amount of damage from Golem's Earthquake. One of the few examples of spinners that doesn't necessarily need pursuit support here. And this Golem is putting in a lot of work. It's excellent because it can just shift the gears like that. And as you can see, TDK is just going back and forth between Blissey, Golem, and now Snorlax, whom we see for the first time, calls out the Skarm and hits it with a flamethrower and does a lot of damage. Luckily for Conflict, that is a 3-hit KO, so he has the time to go for a Toxic here, put this Snorlax on a timer, and also rest up. Look at how much damage that deals. If this Skarm didn't have lefties, this would be another story. So he brings in his Misdreavus. He's been testing things out because he's also been trying to tell if this Snorlax is actually, well, able to threaten the Misdreavus here. So since it's switched out, this should probably suggest that this doesn't also have Lovely Kiss. And it doesn't have Earthquake. The thing is, Flamethrower usually means that the Snorlax is Rest Sleep Talk, and not something like Fire Blast, EQ, Explode, Self-Destruct, and Stab. So it's probably Rest Sleep Talk, Flamethrower, and Double Edge. And that's also probably the case due to the fact that this team looks considerably weak to Jinx in general. So, yeah. Misdreavus here is forced out, and Conflict has to go from Blissey back to Misdreavus. It was really good that he managed to, really good on him that he brought Rapid Spin Cloister, because otherwise the situation would have been looking extremely dire for him. Instead, it's not that taxing for him to switch back and forth. That's what a good stall team is meant to do in the first place. So we see Toxic and Rest, which I think is pretty interesting. So if we stop and talk about the Misdreavus for a second, oftentimes you hear people talk about the Mean Look, Perish Song, and Protect or Pain Split Misdreavus, which is a pain in the butt, but it's also pretty situational given that many teams have phasers in the overused tier of GSC. So oftentimes what people will resort to is something like Thunder or Toxic to status many phasers, and in fact deal with Tyranitar very well. There is also the possibility that this could be, for instance, a Toxic T-Bolt, Rest, Sleep Talk, Missy, but that isn't, I wouldn't think that is what Conflict was contemplating here. So, I'm just deciding to reveal the moves, turn by turn. So the Snorlax goes for a return. Keep him guessing. Goes to the Skarmory because this Earthquake, Explosion, Roar, Rapid Spin Golem can't do anything to Skarmory besides explode. So it's kind of just free HP for the Skarm, unless he phases it out like that. And here we see Zapdos, and what I like a lot about these defensive cores is how you can actually throw a Zapdos in when you have a Blissey. And it works a lot better than if you had a Raikou, and that's because Raikou takes so much spikes damage. It's also just better in the Machampa matchup, so yeah. It's like a pseudo Skarm Raikou core, but divided into 3 parts. So here we see Ice Beam, and that's Blissy's first attacking move. So you definitely know that this Zapdos does not want to stay on the Blissey. On the other hand, this Misdreavus is seeming like it's able to put in a lot of work here. And we see Thunder. As a last move, so sometimes we see Thief, but this one has lefties. There's a possibility that it could have Hypnosis. It could have something else. I'm thinking like Confuse Ray, Pear Song. So TDK is the one who has to start making things happen here. And as you see, Conflict is just staying in. No fucks given. Excuse my French. And just as I had assumed, this is a Flamethrower Sleep Talk. Snorlax. Conflict baits in the potential switch here. Favorable for him because then he can Toxic something if TDK had decided to bring in something like Exeggutor or Golem. Sorry, the nickname is throwing me off a little. So we have the first Stun Spore of the game. And that puts his team in a slightly better position because now that the Skarmory is paralyzed, it doesn't want to take an explosion because in Gen 2 the turn ends. That means that Skarmory has a lot of damage on it. It also means that it's not going to, well, this is still probably a very valuable Mon, considering that there is a very plausible chance that the last Mon is a Marowak. Given that this is a Stun Spore team, it's not uncommon to see Marowak on these teams because Marowak loves paralysis spread. So Skarmory would not be able to switch in on a +2 Marowak if it's paralyzed. So Boom could have been an interesting call there, but I guess TDK was afraid of losing yet another Mon. So if we go back just one sec. Okay, so yeah, he goes to Eggy on the, not on the same turn as Blissey. Oh no, yeah, on the same turn. So here Conflict goes for Ice Beam very boldly, if I do say so myself, and he freezes the Exeggutor. So, you know, a bit of switching here with the Cloyster, but he doesn't seem to have any opening to lay down any spikes. Meantime, the Exeggutor manages to thaw out, and what TDK did here was he switched in the Exeggutor on Misdreavus on a turn in which it was going to use Toxic. So it wouldn't take any damage, but also there's a 10% chance of it thawing out at the end of the turn. So Exeggutor doesn't even have to stay in at the from the beginning of the turn to be able to thaw out. So good call. Otherwise he would have been playing a much more difficult battle. So I'm going to move forward just a bit. So here we see Earthquake Snorlax, finally, as the Golem takes the damage. And Skarmory manages to land on Toxic. So good call. And this Executor does not want to stay in on Skarm here. So he's going to bring in his already poisoned Zapdos, which will take more damage and does not get the opportunity to use Rest because Skarmory uses Whirlwind. And now he takes even more damage, and now there's a Snorlax. So this can be quite risky here. Now Conflict finally has this really big opening. Goes for return. Deals upwards of 30 damage thanks also to the passive damage from Poison on the Snorlax here. And now this is forced to rest. And he decides that he's going to stay in. You know, smack him up a bit. Rough him up a little. He's getting pretty fortunate with the sleep turns, but no critical hit. And TDK is not using Sleep Talk every turn. He wants to preserve that PP. Now he switches back. So he switches from Cloyster back out to Misdreavus. And goes to Skarm, letting it recover some HP. Goes back to Misdreavus. Here once more, another Ice Beam on the Executor. Showing him that he has no fear. So I was just reading my DMs. So the set is Toxic Rest Whirlwind. It's not so the last move could be Drill Peck or Curse. But I don't know how. Okay, never mind. It was a very tricky series of turns there, as the Executor could easily have boomed, and this team is very weak to Zapdos, as you might have guessed, even without the spikes. But he doesn't go for it. It's too risky with the two normal resist / immunities, I guess. And here the egg takes toxic damage, and this is really, really bad because now it's going to be put on a timer. The situation is going to look a lot tougher. Every time Executor switches in, the clock will tick, and Eggy will be closer and closer to its own demise. On the other hand, Misdreavus is healthy as ever. But that doesn't mean that TDK can't be applying his pressure with his Eggy. So here he goes for a Psychic. He may very well even go for a Boom on this turn, which is why Conflict switches to Misdreavus. And look at how much damage it takes away from the Misdreavus, the sleeping Misdreavus. It's not able to stay in 2 more turns taking Psychics here. So very good play on TDK's end. And he has just about 1 more turn to live. He can't stay in on a Zapdos, especially not HP Ice. He goes for Protect, so Conflict reveals the Protect on a turn that the Eggy may have very well chosen to go for Explosion because it's so close to its demise. And this is how you handle Explosion pressure like that. Very, very expert way of handling this Explosion pressure. And now, what's going to happen? So, I didn't manage to click in time. So, this Conflict was nice enough to enlighten me because I reached out to him. I wanted to know about this turn. This turn was, at first sight it can look like a basic turn. It can look like a risky turn. It can look like a turn where it was just so weird, but I don't have any reason to think that this wasn't an optimal play. Now, remember, the core really, really strongly points towards the fact that in the back, there could be a Vaporeon. So Blissey, though not necessarily the best check to Vaporeon, is still good at slowing it down a little bit. But the problem is that Vaporeon can also kind of, just sit on it eventually. Marowak doesn't necessarily care of having Blissey out of the way. Neither does Machamp. So, on the other hand, if Conflict were to decide to preserve his Blissey, what would he switch to? So, he could switch to Skarmory, but then Skarmory would take the explosion. It could get crit. It could get KO'd. It would not be able to switch in on Snorlax anymore. It would also mean that he loses his Marowak counter or Machamp counter or check, Machamp check. Misdreavus is in 2-hit KO range of Psychic. So, not looking very good, right? Well, Conflict decides to weigh out the fact that his Blissey has put in more than enough work and that he can probably handle the Zapdos, given that it is at 69%. He still has very solid defenses, and his Snorlax is healthy. So, the other thing that I didn't mention yet was that the fact that this Exeggutor speed ties with Blissey. So it's actually a 50-50 situation. But 50% chance of winning a speed tie and keeping your Blissey sounds pretty good, especially if it means you get to keep your Skarmory. So, yeah, I found that scenario to be really, really good. I'm not saying that it was ballsy or it was suboptimal. In fact, it was really a really solid play. I have something else here I wanted to mention. I believe. Turn them. Yeah, no. Okay. So, moving on. Because this game, let me tell you, there's still quite a bit more. I'm going to try and speed up a little bit now. So we see that the egg is gone, Cloyster's gone. The team is looking in a really tough, look like it's in a really tough spot. We still haven't seen what the last mon is. Skarmory managed to get the rest, which is really good for it. That means that the team is fundamentally just as solid as it was from the outset of this match. Whereas on the other hand, TDK has just run out of one of his most valuable options here, and Blissey reveals a T-Bolt now and goes for a Heal Bell, recovers the HP of Skarmory. We don't have any Sleep Talkers on this team. So, losing Blissey would have also been a little bit tricky for the matter of Sleep Talk as well, because once your Mon's HP are down, then they can't really come back from that. But Conflict is being rewarded for his decisions each turn, and TDK more and more is becoming desperate to make something happen here. So he comes in with the Golem. Sadly for it, the Blissey manages to recover itself, and it still has 4 Heal Bells left. Not to mention that Golem doesn't have many entry points. And we still haven't seen whether or not this Zapdos has something like a Hidden Power Water or Ice. So Conflict not only playing the GSC game, but also the Knowledge game. As you can see, Misdreavus just walls this Snorlax. It can sit on it. It kind of, I think it gets 5-hit KO'd by Flamethrower. But not when it's going through Sleep Talk rolls. It's just too much probability involved. Skarmory, on the other hand, can just dodge Golem's Earthquake and recover HP. So, Misdreavus comes in yet again. So every time Conflict has Skarmory, he can just switch to Misdreavus. Misdreavus just sits on the Snorlax, and the Skarmory's sole purpose here is just to stay healthy, so as to protect the team from the 6th Mon, which is in the back. We haven't yet seen it. The thing is, if there is a Vaporeon in the back, it doesn't necessarily mind the presence of all of these Mons, especially since Cloyster doesn't have Explosion. The only thing TDK would have to be worrying about at that point is the Zapdos. And in comes a Vaporeon. It was phased in. I'm your doll. Probably growth, from what I'm guessing. Could be something like growth rest talk. And now Snorlax is probably in a 3-hit KO range. Yes, 3-hit KO. And Vaporeon taking a consistent amount of damage, though, from the return. Return is quite powerful. More than Body Slam, less than Double Edge, but no recoil. Those are your trade-offs. Snorlax taking some damage, but still wanting to apply pressure. Here, this turn is crucial because, Vaporeon not only has the risk of calling a bad move, for instance, Sleep Talk and then Growth, but the Snorlax, if it were to die, then essentially TDK's Vaporeon can be KO'd by the Zapdos here. And that can be somewhat troublesome. I don't think that's what Conflict wants. I don't remember what he goes for. Yeah, no, he stays in. So he decides to stay in. Hits the Golem for some, standard chip. And now Conflict has even more leeway, because now that he knows that there's a Vaporeon here, he can just keep his Skarmory, healthy to protect against Golem, spread Toxic, and wreak havoc. So, in come the trusty rusty spikes here, add just a little bit of extra pressure. Zapdos goes for Protect. And now that he went for Protect, shoutouts to BKC and his Power of Protect video, he had momentum here. He managed to bait the Vaporeon in. So he goes for a Whirlwind, and now Vaporeon is in once more and is taking damage each turn. Snorlax takes some more T-Bolt damage. Conflict dodges and spreads Toxic once again, and now the Zapdos is really running out of Thunder PP. So, yeah. Surprisingly, though, Conflict does not want to use his Misdreavus as a spin blocker, and has not attempted once to do so. That's because he values its ability to block Snorlax much more than to, maintain its own spikes, which are like a bonus, as he told me. This Vaporeon can be dangerous even for Zapdos in the right conditions, especially since this one probably doesn't have rest. So, coming in, goes for Thunder? Yes. So, at this point, TDK has to hope for something to happen, like a crit maybe. It's in range of another hit, but as long as the Sleep Talk turns are going in his favor, his Vaporeon may live another day. Goes back to Vaporeon. Switches to Zapdos, and finally, Conflict reveals the 4th move on the Misdreavus. It's a Perish Song. Really interesting. This basically forces the Zapdos to switch out eventually. It's, you put a Pokemon on a timer so that they can't stay in. Here TDK does not get the roll and does not manage to KO the Cloyster. Zapdos can no longer stay in, and now Cloyster has spikes, or lays down the spikes. And now things are looking even more and more grim. The Blissey comes in. Chips Golem one last time. I don't think Conflict tries another time for spikes. I'm not sure. There's so much pressure going on here. And Blissey even manages to... Like, Conflict actually calls out the switch here. He reads the switch and... Or basically calls out the switch. So, yeah. He manages to land an Ice Beam on the Golem. And so all of the Exploders are gone. All that are left are the Sleep Talkers. Vaporeon is may die soon. Cloister can freely lay spikes here, but he has to watch out for Vap. Bring in Zapdos, can phase, can damage it, can make a lot of magic happen. And here, once again, the Perish Song coming in clutch here, forcing TDK to make another switch again. And now Blissey's essentially staying in on the Vaporeon here. Brings in his Misdreavus. Skarmory is going to possibly phase it out. Yes. All right. And then Zapdos lands a crit, and TDK forfeits. Now, I think that it was good on TDK to, try and, make things happen, try and control things. I think that his switching with Golem was pretty good. The first turn of Explosion was rather unfortunate, as well as the Sleep turn. I think that would have made it a little bit easier for him having Blissey out of the way. But in any case, if you guys enjoyed, by all means, I recommend that you leave a like, maybe a comment, share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel to watch some more GSC or SPL content. Join the GSC Discord, which I will be leaving a link to in the description if you want. And GG's, I love you.